Disney Fan Magazine from December 20th, 2020, Discovering Walt by Jim Fanning. His is one of the most well-known names in the world. His very signature, or a design based upon it, is immediately recognizable the world over. Yet many know little about the real-life man behind the name, and some are even unaware that this man was a real person who actually lived. The man, of course, is Walt Disney. This year, 2021, is the 121st anniversary of the birth of this remarkable showman, entrepreneur, and storyteller. But even as we celebrate his birth and honor and enjoy anew his accomplishments, we cannot help but note the fact that the man himself is little known among people in general in the United States. And though he is one of the most acclaimed American citizens who worked in the realm of the arts, with the company that bears his name flourishing as an entertainment giant, many of the very people who enjoy Disney theme parks, movies, TV series, or other productions know nothing beyond the name. I often encounter people who don't even realize that Walt Disney was a real person, states Becky Klein, director of the Walt Disney Archives. They think he is a representative of a brand like Betty Crocker or Colonel Sanders, who was a real person but has been fictionalized. I love to explain that yes, he was a real man, a very talented artist, a genius with an amazing gift for storytelling and an uncanny understanding of what an audience craves. Author of such books as Travels with Walt Disney and Walt Disney's Imagineering Legends and the Genesis of the Disney Theme Park, Disney authority Jeff Curdy observes, "I believe Walt is actually very well known today, but as a corporate founder and symbol, and an icon, but not for his actual life and accomplishments. These are not well known because his long-standing superficial public identity as a movie maker or showman belies his complexities as a person." Asked to elaborate on this assertion, Jeff replied, "Walt was an extraordinarily complex genius, informed by the context of his environment and times, who in turn became one of the most influential global cultural figures of the 20th century. But at his heart, he was a simple, unassuming, and fundamentally humble man who simply became excited by ideas and projects and knew that a global audience would share that excitement." Born on December 5, 1901, Walter Elias Disney had an almost unshakable confidence in his own abilities to create engaging stories, whatever the form or media, done in a unique style that became epitomized by the phrase "the Disney touch." "When I was a kid," the great showman once revealed, "I read an art book, and the author advised young artists to be themselves. That decided it for me." From the start of his career, the producer set out to establish the name Walt Disney as a hallmark of quality. "Anything that has the Disney name to it is something we feel responsible for," Walt was to later say. As a veteran animator, Dick Humer explained, "All Disney ever wanted was to entertain with excellence. He used to tell us, 'Make it so good, they'll have to want it.' Walt always felt he could connect with his audience, that what he liked, they would respond to and gravitate toward too, and making his name so well known, and as the very involved producer of the productions that were heralded by the words Walt Disney Presents, Walt became the face of his organization as well, even though fame was his goal only insofar as it promoted the Disney brand. 'If I am a celebrity,' he would say, 'it has never helped me to make a picture, nor has it ever bettered my polo game, which I certainly wish it would. No, being a celebrity doesn't mean so much.'" Still, even though his name has been a household word since the 1930s, Walt's visage was not well known until he started appearing on U.S. television. It was writer-producer Bill Walsh who insisted the Great Showman appear on the first Disney TV production in 1950 as himself, because he was the personality behind the Disney Studios. When Disneyland, the weekly Disney Anthology Hour, debuted on the ABC television network on October 27, 1954, it was also produced by Bill Walsh, who again urged that Walt appear as the on-camera host. From then on, Walt's image as the warm, welcoming, and knowledgeable host was firmly established. And although there were other dimensions and aspects to this man, this on-camera charisma was a reality, not a manufactured image. I always wish that I had been able to meet and talk to Walt firsthand It would have been such an exciting thing, says Becky, but my first interactions were through a television screen. As a family, we were very dedicated to watching Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color every Sunday night at home. Walt introduced and hosted those shows, so I got to see him in person every week, and that made me feel like he was my own dear friend. Even as a child, I was attracted to his personality. He seemed approachable, knowledgeable, curious about everything around him, and very good-natured. The perfect beloved uncle. Once I started working for the Walt Disney Archives and got to know so much more about him, it was wonderful to realize that he was indeed all of those things. For myself as a writer who has frequently written about Walt, the Walt Disney Archives has been an always helpful, unerring, and bottomless resource about this fascinating man in my professional projects, almost all of which have been officially sanctioned by the Walt Disney Company. I do not recall learning anything specific about him in elementary school or high school, aside from the encyclopedia set that we had in our home. Jeff Curdy notes that I still refer people to the 1976 Bob Thomas biography, Walt Disney, an American Original, which remains the most factually and tonally accurate and fair-minded of all the many Walt Disney biographies. It was this very volume that I pored over to discover the life of the man before there were so many other biographies. Later, I was to write a biography of Walt myself, in addition to writing other books and many articles about his life and career. At least some young American people in school today are in fact exposed to Walt Disney in such classics as social studies. A father of three, Curdy reveals that Walt Disney is now a fixture of public schools alongside famous 20th century business and entertainment figures. His somewhat rags to riches story presents easy teachable ideas for lower grade schools. An artist, writer, and Disney aficionado who is in his 20s, Dean Brinkerhoff, affirms this, but indicates the information, though obviously indicating Walt was a real person, is superficial and is included alongside other figures such as Charlie Chaplin. The difference for this youthful Disney enthusiast is that he actively sought out the plethora of resources to be found in our media-saturated world. I do remember seeing him prominently as a person in books, says Dean. Then I remember as a teenager watching a few of the really old Disneyland television episodes and knowing he was the host. I really began exploring and expanding my knowledge of him and his work. It was really the Walt Disney Treasures DVD set, Your Host, Walt Disney, that enabled me to analyze him as a human being and his brand and his work. That's when I remember really starting to explore those finer aspects. I love his scenes such as his meeting with Sergei Prokofiev in the 4th anniversary show from 1957, working with him on Peter and the Wolf for Make Mine Music from 1946. With him leaning on the piano, listening, just enjoying the music. That was one of my earliest memories of admiring the man as a human being and the respect he has for art and literature and the wonderful people around him. That felt just like me enjoying Peter and the Wolf. To see him in sort of my shoes was a neat experience, even if it was staged for that Disneyland TV episode. These vintage video appearances led this aficionado onto books, including and especially the book of Walt Disney quotations compiled by Dave Smith of the Walt Disney Archives. Dean's experience demonstrates that there are more resources available about Walt the person than ever before, but that to discover these treasures, the viewer/reader must first be personally motivated and then must actively seek out such information sources. Luckily, some of Walt's TV appearances, such as The Plausible Impossible from 1956, are available on such platforms as Disney+, at least in the US. But today, the company bearing his name has done much to foster interest in and discovery of Walt the Man through D23. I think the creation of D23, the official Disney fan club, has had an impact on the understanding of who Walt really was. From the beginning, it was the main mission of the club to share Walt's history with the world, as well as to celebrate the films, attractions, events, and stories that we are telling today, all rooted firmly in the foundations that Walt first laid. It's been one of my main goals since becoming director of the Walt Disney Archives to not only preserve and catalog Walt's legacy, but to share it as broadly as possible. The official D23 quarterly magazine, Disney 23, has frequently published behind-the-scenes articles about the man, including the long-running feature A Walk with Walt, written by me, as a year-by-year account of Walt's walk through history, starting in the pivotal year of 1923. What do people who have an interest in knowing about Walt Disney, the actual person, want to know? His professional work, such as the making of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937, and the creation of Disneyland Park has been well celebrated. So again, it is the human being that beckons. So much has been written about Walt's creative input and legacy, reveals Becky Klein, that I find that the questions people usually ask me are about his personal life, how he viewed the world, how he interacted with his family, what inspired him, what he liked to read, eat, and drink, where he liked to travel, the kind of things that we want to know about our friends. Beyond Walt's artistic achievements and genius for storytelling, it is the human dimensions of this extraordinary man that additionally fascinates Disney fan Brinkerhoff. I was surprised to find that he could lose his temper and was very brash and blunt in expressing his dislikes for whatever he did not like, and his serious disagreements with some of his staff. On TV, he's your Uncle Walt, and he's bringing all these Disney characters, but he's human too, and prone to vices as any of us are. But at the same time, the image projected in his TV appearances is real. He's my real Uncle Walt. But are there other facilities and organizations that such a Disney aficionado turn toward? We will take a closer look in part 2 in the next issue of Disney Fan.